people to speak today, starting with Professor GP, considering that he was his mentor. Following him, we will have a couple of contemporaries of Dr. MRS Rao, Dr. Ganesh Kishore and Dr. Ramesh Gupta. That will be then followed by various trainees of Dr. MRS Rao. And I asked something like 10 people, and I know several of them have said that they're going to speak, and others, I don't know if they're here. I'm going to call out their names in an order. So Dr. GP can talk as long as he wants, but the rest of us, we should stick to a 3 to 5 minute long presentation. Before you speak, please tell us what's your association with Dr. MRS Rao. If you were a student, also tell us, what was the time frame when you were a student. So with that, I'm going to ask Professor GP to speak a few words about MRS Rao.
Thank you, Prasad. As I've been sending emails, MRS was my first student, but in a very different way, because he actually joined P.S. Sharma. And as you all know, P.S. Sharma went to Switzerland to attend the International Biochemistry Congress. And those days it was only IUB. And he passed away in the railway station, Basel railway station. So all his students got transferred to me. And MRS that way was first to join. Of course, I had my own students. That's it. There was a Paramjit Singh Chima. He used to argue, sir, I am your direct student, I am your first student. So anyway, MRS passing away was a big shock to all of us. We really, I think August 13th, Hema Balram called me in the night, and I couldn't believe it. And next day morning, I went to his house, MRS house. I met his mother, 92-year-old.
Oh.
And that was, heartbreaking, actually. I tried to comfort her, say a few words in Kannada and all that. She said, Nanjiva hogbekaitu, like that she was telling me, very difficult to, comfort a mother. But anyway, that is something. It was funny, actually, because his wife told me he went upstairs and watered the plants and came down. And then he had a bit of asthma, and then said, I am I'm breathless. They gave him inhaler. It was much more than that, and took him to 3 hospitals. Anyway, this passed away, which was very sad, actually. Well, he actually started my scientific career. Some of you might know I worked on transcriptional regulation of cytochrome P450 liver protein involved in drug metabolism. It was all started by MRS. And from there, he has developed a deep interest in messenger RNA transcription. And it continued. And I know, Vijay and others would talk about, he established the chromatin laboratory, chromatin biology laboratory. We used to have weekly meetings. There was no really, it was some kind of a corridor where at the end of it, we would meet. And MRS, would have his say, whatever, very soft-spoken, but very firm. Very firm in his, later years, as you all know, he became president of JNC SR. And he was, of course, professor there, honorary professor, then became president for 10 years. So all his career, some committees, if I remember, he followed me actually. I quit at some point of time, like Tata Innovation Fellowship of DBT, Ramalinga Swami Fellowship of DBT, Ramanujan Fellowship of DST. These were all introduced by Government of India to attract, all of you. People abroad would come back with these fellowships. And I used to chair some of them, and at my turn, he chaired many of these committees. And in actually very important committees, there's the Science and Engineering Research Council of the Department of Science and Technology. And he used to chair the section on genetics and the genome analysis. Very early, he developed competence and also interest. And he continued it, and I think that's where he established the chromatin biology laboratory. Very good scientist, deeply committed, not superficial. He will go very deep, but he will never advertise. When you talk to him, you don't realize he's an extraordinary scientist. Very, very simple. But even when he became chairman, etc., he used to be soft-spoken. As I said, very firm in his views later on. And as president of JNC, he used to come. He kind of always kept me informed of all his moves. That he's moving to Jawaharlal Nehru Center. CNR Rao invited him actually. And he said, I'm moving, GP, I'm moving there. I said, all of you, best of luck. And he established a lab. And I think when he passed away, he still had that laboratory in JNC. So, I know his family a little bit. I know his wife is very firm. But as I said, meeting the mother, 92-year-old mother, was a very painful experience, actually. Extraordinarily very good scientist, deeply committed scientist. Served the government of India as chairman of many committees. Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, IISr, as we call it. So he was chair of IISr Kolkata, IISr Trivandrum, Scientific Advisory Committee Board, and he also chaired the SAC of IICB, Institute of Chemical Biology in Kolkata, and Trivandrum IISr. So Kolkata IISr, he occupied many of the recipient of several awards. And in India, the government civilian awards, Padma Shri, considered to be important, and he was a recipient. All that, it's a past, all these achievements, recognitions, they remain, person is gone. So I still feel very, very painful to, he was 75, 10 years younger to me. So these days it's not time to go, but nothing is in our hands, I'm an old timer, still believe in God and believe in destiny. Whatever that happens, we have no control on that. I can only say he as a scientist, as an administrator, as a colleague, he was extraordinary, very valuable person. Soft-spoken, very firm. I keep repeating that. It's very, very characteristic of Rao. Well, I don't want to take much time. I'm sure there are many who would like to recall his contributions in chromatin biology. One thing, he went to Harry Bush lab in US, and then, that is where he also developed interest in cancer biology. And the two interesting things which he had was spermatogenesis is one, and cancer biology. And always on genome, nucleosome structure, stones, variant stones. I'm sure there are others who know more about all those kind of contributors. I think we will miss a great scientist. I miss a great colleague. We used to share our concerns, at some stage about India's growth, what will happen to science in India, all these concerns. He used to come to my office and we used to share some of this. I deeply miss him. I'm sure many of colleagues miss him. Extraordinary person, extraordinary scientist, and extraordinary colleague, actually. I pay my respects on behalf of all of you, and may his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. GP. So can I ask Dr. Ganesh Kishore to speak next?
Sure. Thank you. It's very hard to follow somebody who has seen the entire life of Dr. Rao unfold. so let me thank Chuck and Vinayak for bringing us together today to both mourn his loss and celebrate the life of Dr. Rao. In my books, I do not have enough terms in my vocabulary to describe Dr. Rao. A superb scientist, a solid scientist from a scientific perspective. But I also had the opportunity to see the personal side of Dr. Rao, because we stayed with him in Houston. Whenever we went to Houston, he visited us in Austin. For about 3 years, we had a very profound relationship. These were the years between 1976 to 1979, what we call the post-Watergate era. In fact, in many respects, it was not that different from the post-COVID era we are witnessing here in the United States. It was a world in transition, social unrest, economic unrest, et cetera, et cetera. And during that period, Rao provided that rock solid comfort, friendship, mentorship. And I will also use the term parentship, because he was the eldest amongst us here in Texas when we were there in Austin. Rob, of course, he committed his entire life to research and making life better for others. There are many others who are better than me in terms of describing his accomplishments, because that was not the side of his personality or his life that we focused on. We were friends. And it was the common heritage of being from Mysore, from being from Karnataka, having gone to the Department of Biochemistry at the Indian Institute of Science, that brought us together and that built bonds between us. And when I say the term us, it was not just me. It's also my wife, Nandini. We interacted with him regularly. And a few others who may or may not be here today. That includes Prakash of CFTRI. He was quite a character as well. And Renuka Prasad and his wife, Katari Raju and his wife, for those of you who may remember Katari Raju, MK Sardana. I think he was also your student, GP, if I remember right. Yeah. And of course, with time, many others came. But that was the core, which got together regularly. And when we were fresh off the boat, the Desis, Rao helped us acclimate not just to the United States, but to Texas, which has its own unique ways of doing things. So in many respects, we remain eternally grateful for how Rao helped us ease into the United States. And although we never talked science, we knew that we were both working in laboratories where there was a lot of demand on us. Bush used to have meetings on Saturdays, and until 1 p.m. or so on Saturday afternoons, he would hold a court with all the professors, assistant professors, associate professors, postdocs, grad students. Rao used to tell me that used to be at least a 50-person plus affair, where everybody had to spill their guts and get chastised if they had not performed, because Professor Bush was quite meticulous in terms of going through stuff. And I think in a way, it may have molded the personality as well. Besides GP and his commitment and his dedication to science, Bush's dedication to science, especially to cancer, probably had a significant influence on Rao as well. But in our interactions with him, he was one of the most compassionate and gentle souls that I have ever interacted with, always open and always a teacher. The side of personality, which I will talk very briefly about in the next few minutes. He introduced us to Texas in his big car, an average personality in terms of his figure, body figure, but he had a huge car which could take about 15 people if he wanted to. And he would drive us to Galveston. He would drive us to space station, mission control. He would drive us to Astroworld. He would drive us to Astrodome. So we saw many things. He cooked dosa for us, made chapatis for us. I mean, there was nothing that limited our interaction. So there are many, many fond memories that we have with Rob. I do remember the time when we went to Astroworld. There was a roller coaster ride called the Texas Cyclone. I do not know if it still exists, but this is one of those notorious roller coasters. And Rao took us all the way up to the entry point, and he said, "You two go, I'm not coming." And of course, Prakash and Sardana and we all said, "Why not?" And his response was, "I have experienced this. This is not for me, but I think you should experience it." And so we went and came back, and of course, we liked it. And that was the teacher side of him. That is, we all should experience, within limits, of course. He knew that it was not going to kill us. And fortunately, at that time, roller coaster accidents used to be minimum compared to what it is today. So we survived it. And then the next ride he took us to was a centrifuge, where the entire body is subject to a few G forces. And he said, "This is the second ride that I'm not going to take." And I looked at people inside the centrifuge being glued to the wall. And I said, "I'm not going to take this ride either. And the only person who actually took that ride was Prakash, who vomited for several hours after that. Goes to show that subjecting a human body to certain types of G forces is not necessarily the best. And I guess none of us were cut out to be space people either. The other fond memory that I have of Rao is actually when I just joined Institute. I joined Institute of Science in 1972. It's actually hard to believe it's exactly 51 years ago. And one of the first people who I met after the grueling interviews and the admission process was MRS Rao, who was with late Parthasarathy at that time, and asked me, "How was the interview?" And I said it was good. He said, "What were Professor Kama's questions?" I thought that was quite a pointed question, even at that time of my life. But I said, he asked me two questions. His first question was euthanasia. And I said it has something to do with kindness and killing in order to put one out of misery. And of course, Kama remarked it's called mercy killing. And little did I know that it was about my own mercy killing in the interview process. And the next question was, what is nautobiology? Have you heard of the term nautobiology? And I said, I have no clue as to what nautobiology is. And Dr. Kama had a smirk and made the remark, "I wanted to know the limits of your knowledge, Mr. Kishore. He actually used to call me Kishore. And now that we have established there's no more need for any more interview, thank you. And of course, not a biology is the study of germ-free life. And when you fail in something, you always learn and it remains etched in your memory. And when I mentioned that to Rao, he had a smirk on his face. And then he basically said, of course, I lost touch with Rao. I mean, we interacted with him infrequently, but I always knew whenever we talked that his commitment to science did not diminish. In fact, I had opportunities to meet him very briefly, but he walked me around the laboratory in the mid-90s when he had just acquired the sequencer, and he talked about the importance of DNA reading, even at that time. And we remained friends, but our conversations were infrequent, obviously, because we both had very busy lives and other things to focus on. But if I were to say, you could actually learn from Rao many, many things. I think GP has alluded to those were the values with which he led his life. That is compassion, commitment to excellence, commitment to friendship, his absolute dedication, and honoring his word. Every word that he spoke, he actually honored it by following through. So if there was a rock solid person that I would say I could rely upon to do anything, any time of the day, any hour, if I needed help, it would always be Dr. Rao who would be there. So that was the kind of value he stood for. And I hope the divine gives us the courage to continue to cherish the values that he stood for and practice them in our own life. May his soul rest in peace and give strength to his family to carry through, cherishing the same values that he stood for in his life. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
Thanks, Kish. Appreciate that. So next we're going to hear from another contemporary of Dr. Rao, both in IISc and in Houston, Texas. That is Dr. Professor Ramesh Gupta. He's from Kentucky, where he's also a chair of. He's a chair. I don't know if the department. I know your name has a chair in it. So he's going to speak a few words. Dr. Gupta.
Thank you, Prasad. Well, good morning, good afternoon in India. So my acquaintance with Professor Rao goes back in the 70s as a postdoctoral fellow, and I will tell you all about it. And then later on, we both got married respectively and got family friends and had many, many interactions. First and foremost, my wife and I express our condolences to dear Padma, Professor Rao's wife, and their two sons, and of course to Rao's dear mother. It's highly emotional for me. I was a postdoctoral scholar in Baylor pharmacology in '73, and then when suddenly a year later I saw somebody from India, it just took me just moments to get to know him, and we got closer and closer. All these years he stayed in the department. We used to cook together. We used to have maybe 3 times meals together. My room happened to be the center where Rao and 3-4 other friends would huddle up. Every Friday, we had to go to pizza, kind of enjoy ourselves. His simplicity, he won't talk much, softness, we heard from his mentor repeatedly, and I would second to that. We had to take words out of his mouth. He just would simply smile because of his simplicity and softness. He was just a few months older to me, so was like my older brother, but I did teach him driving, so I don't mind taking that credit for that. We used to drive pretty much all the trips we have taken. We heard so much from Dr. Kishore. I didn't get to know Dr. Kishore there when he was in Austin, but I think I may have introduced him to all these astro world, all these beautiful rites and so on, which Dr. Kishore pointed out, because I was 1 year ahead of him in that. We used to play a lot of tennis after dinner in the basement of the dome we were staying, Favreau Hall. Many times he will win. I mean, he was a winning soul, right? We will play Scrabble. So there, I could win sometime, he will win sometime. We had so much togetherness over there. Then later on, became family friend. I got married in 76. So he was still, we interacted so well. And then he was getting ready to go to India. He said, oh, I had to go, I had to take care of my parents. Of course, he has to. He went back. It was a huge personal loss for me that he's going back there, but I was so happy that he has to take care of his parents. Many times we will interact. There were no iPhones or emails and so on, but anyway, we will still talk on the regular snail mail. He would feel so uncomfortable that he's not getting the opportunity over there. And I had to, a couple of times I did notice he will even cry. I had never seen that side of him. So I had to console him as his personal friend that what I know of you and know you, you are going to do extremely well. So just allow little time. I understand he was appointed pool officer, then of course rest assistant professor, and the rest is all history. I won't get into it. I just knew his contributions to science were going to be essentially limitless. I visited Bangalore in 2001, did meet with Padma and their sons and so on, had great time together. That's the time when I saw him. He was pretty much the same. If Prasad can flash that photo I just sent of the 70s. So the only difference had occurred. He was very much the same, except you can see that his hair had become changed the color. That's the only difference. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Then I had to tell him, Rao, that you seem to be under huge stress. What's going on? We have to move you out. You need some little break. Oh, I just can't take time off. I'm so busy. I said, I don't care whether you're busy or not. You do need some few weeks off. I had to convince his wife that was the best way to do that. Finally, he agreed. That time I was University of Kentucky, Lexington. So we managed to sponsor him, and he had 4 to 6 weeks of a mini sabbatical. We had great, and Padma, of course, joined, and we had great time together in 2003. And that time, at the morning tea time, we will kind of discuss things. He said, well, he had a chance to move to JNC as the president. I was so delighted, I cannot express. And that time I was negotiating with my present location, University of Louisville, the Cancer Center. So we will kind of compare notes every day, what's where situation. For me, everything was set. He said, oh, even everything is set for him. He's still waiting to get a letter signed by the president of India. So that was our little story about moving to 2 different places. His traits are simplicity, softness, you heard so repeatedly previously, his dedication, devotion for science. I tell you, when I went in 2001 and 2006, second time my wife and I visited, he took me to JNC. The very first thing, instead of going to the president suite, he took me to, I said, where are you going? He said, oh, I'm going to my lab. I just couldn't believe it. He still maintains the lab. He said, oh, I have to spend 2 to 3 hours. Otherwise, I can't do things if I enter the administrative office. I mean, I was so delighted that the person whom I knew back 40 years ago, he's going to continue despite taking such huge administrative responsibility. he will still be devoted to science to this great extent which he did. Perfect gentleman, man of just few words. I don't think I ever saw him getting angry in all my associations at all. So not only the Rao family lost a husband, a father, and a son, whatever I knew of Professor Rao, I truly feel India lost a highly eminent scientist. We pray to the Lord Almighty that Professor Rao's soul rest in peace, and bless his dear wife Padma, their sons, and his dear mother for the courage to bear this such a precious loss. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Ramesh, for sharing those sentiments and sharing your experience with Dr. Rao. So the next several speakers I have on my list are chronologically arranged, beginning with students who he mentored. So that makes Meet go next. So the story of my own overlap with Dr. Rao began in biochemistry. And I had already joined the department and had been assigned. In my mind was a strong belief that I was wrongly assigned to a thesis mentor I didn't request. So I asked around, what do I do? I really am not interested in this lab. People said, normally when you have been assigned to a wrong lab, you have to go to chair and the chairman will sort it out for you. But you've been assigned to the chairman, sorry, it's a bad news. So then I decided I would go and speak to the director of the institute. I didn't know at that time I could go to, say, perhaps the divisional director. But the director of the institute was not available. So then I repeatedly went multiple times, and finally he sent a message through his PA saying that, Prasad, you should just go and speak to Dr. Ganguly. So I walked into Dr. Ganguly's office and said I was not interested in, doing my thesis in his lab. So he asked me why. He said, because lipids are not my interest. So I was interested in things like molecular biology or enzyme biochemistry. So he said, no problem, you can do that. So shortly there'll be this fellow, he called him a fellow, coming from Texas, and he's a master of molecular biology. He will do allow you to do biochemistry. So it was a very fortunate thing for me, because I walked into Ganguly's office thinking that he's going to fire me after he hears the words that I don't want to be in your lab. But he didn't fire me. So actually it was really great fortune to have MRS Rao mentor me, even though not officially, but I'm really the first student he saw through from the start, starting with my first paper, all the way to writing my thesis and then defending my thesis. And then after that, yelling at me for not acknowledging Dr. Ganguly in my talk. So at the end of my talk, I actually didn't acknowledge anybody. I claimed that I had no time. But somebody said Rao doesn't get angry. He was not angry, but he said, I want you to now go to every lab. I'll walk you to Dr. Adiga's lab, Dr. GP's lab. You thank them personally in front of me, he said. So, and there were many valuable lessons to be learned from Rao. One of the things is I picked up calling him Rao because everyone in the lab was calling him Rao. They were all senior students. At one point, he told me, Prasad, I want you to graduate very soon and leave. So I was very happy. So, you think I'm ready? He said, no, I don't think you're ready, but you call me Rao and all the juniors are picking up the same thing. So I want you to be gone. So because after me, Bijay Rao and Jagmohan Singh started calling him Rao. Then junior ones came, even they started calling him Rao. So anyway, I agree that he was a really brilliant mind. He had a brilliant mind, sharp analytical skills. He worked so hard. He had a laser-like focus on work. And I consider myself very hardworking. I was in the lab, 24/7, I thought, but he was there anytime I went to the lab. So, which was great for me because, as a starting student, he was always there to ask, for me to ask questions. He took the job of mentoring me very seriously, and his hard work inspired me to be, to also work hard and, make the right judgments. And my, yeah. So the first author, any paper that I had with him was less than a year after he joined Department of Biochemistry as a full officer. He also taught me to balance work with life. I know as PIs, none of us like the term, work-life balance, because, our trainees keep on labeling it as work-life balance, but they really do more life and less work. But Rao, really had a good recipe for that. So frequently in the weekends, he was single at the time. He was not married. So he took me to MG Road. We would, eat out. We would see a English movie, all at Rao's expense. It was amazing. Plus, some weekends he would take me to his home, and he was brilliant in many games, starting with cricket, indoor games like carom, chess, and he beat me in all of those. And then he was not, his goal was not to beat me. He was, trying to play with me to see what I really like. And then he stopped any game where he saw me losing, and then he would switch to another game. And then when he saw that I was playing chess really well, we stuck there, and we played a longer time. So then, yeah, and his pet peeve, as I said, he's a very sharp mind, really smart individual, which is really, and he has so much knowledge. And when there was a difficult decision to make, he made the decision quickly. And that was possible because of both his knowledge, wide knowledge, and also his sharp mind. And when we went to seminars by someone who came back from US or UK, he always scoffed at the idea of why do you need to be abroad to publish in JBC? That was his pet peeve.
Yeah.
So when I it so happened that when I was in IISc visiting, actually gave a talk in IISc, and around the same time actually received a fax from Science magazine saying the paper was published, accepted. I mean, I could see the glee in his face. He was just really enjoying it like his own paper. He started telling everyone Prasad just has a science paper from his own lab. And yeah, someone said that yeah, Dr. GP was saying that he worked on P450 and all this work in his lab. Then he did a lot of work on small RNAs like U1 RNA, U6 RNAs. He used to tell me about the history of RNA capping. So mRNA capping was done by Aaron Shatkin, but the person who really showed M7G methylation first was Harris Bush. That was on the small RNAs. And he was telling me that, everyone gave credit to Shatkin, but Shatkin always gave credit to Harris Bush because he knew that was who discovered it first. And also, Rao was not interested in sort of, taking what is not his. For example, there was a time when I was really upset with Professor Ganguly. He was never involved in my research. So one time he introduced me to a foreign dignitary saying that this is Prasad. He's working on retinol binding protein in goat testicles. That was not true. I never worked on goat. So when we wrote the paper, I went to Rao and said, I don't want this individual to be my corresponding author. He didn't write the paper. He didn't look at my paper draft. We are submitting it, and he's never going to be in the picture. So why should he be? So Rao, someone else who is a starting assistant professor type, would probably have agreed easily to become the lost author because the first author is demanding that. But Rao would not do that. He would not have any of that. So he sort of unleashed advice from many different people, including Dr. GP. I remember I had to go into Dr. GP's office, sit down with him, and he quietly explained to me, Prasad, that's not the way it works. So this is the lab that belongs to Dr. Ganguly. He started this project. So even though he didn't advise you, give you any specific help, he has to be the corresponding author, which finally, helped me quiet down. So as I said, he was when he moved to JNC, I started seeing him every year because I had started a multi-year collaboration with Dr. Uday Kumar Ranga, and Rao became the president of JNC. And I conducted two, actually Kalpana and myself together, we organized two major international AIDS meetings there. Rao was very proud and supportive. And I'm sure every one of you, the trainees, have the same story, similar story of how proud he was of each of you. But it's really very gratifying to have your PhD mentor at the helm of an institution that is hosting this international meeting. So I actually asked him to speak. He would not speak more than 2 sentences, but those 2 sentences were full of pride. Finally, I will just end with one little incident. So one big lesson he gave all of us is that be a doer, not a talker. So what I'm telling you is that there was an incident. It was just 1 year of his stay as a pool officer had just finished, and at that time there was in one of the professor bungalows there was some kind of a high tea. At the high tea, I went to that, and I happened to be there with him when this senior professor, I won't mention the names, some of you will guess, Dr. GP will guess. He said openly that, Rao, there was a proposal to raise your salary. I told them that, there is no need because, you owned your own house. I'm sure you agree. He's saying that in front of a student. Then I asked Dr. Rao later on, how are you going to fight this kind of an attitude? He snapped back saying that, of course, by working hard and doing what I know I can do best. That will change their mind. So that was a big lesson from him. So with that, I'm going to stop. And I would like to wish that Dr. Rao's soul rests in peace, and Padma and his mother and children and his sister, they all would have the strength to bear the loss. Thanks. So the next name I have is Professor B.J. Rao, who is the Vice Chancellor of University of Hyderabad.
I was with MRS Rao as a student from 1978 to 84. I had joined him as a very naive fellow. I had come from L.K. Ramachandran's lab, and I actually joined Ganguly's lab. I was a Ganguly student. I went and met Ganguly, said, what do you think I should do with you? He asked me, where do you come from? I said, I come from L.K. Ramachandran's lab, Osmania. Oh, so you know a lot of proteins. There is this person called MRS Rao who is trying to look at proteins in chromatin. I think you should join him. He's in my lab, go and talk to him. I went and talked to him, and I couldn't place MRS Rao in the very beginning, because he used to talk very little. Whatever little he used to talk a lot of sense. So I took some time to figure out what MRS Rao is. And then once I figured out, I thought I really liked the person. He was a very beautiful human being, firstly. Very, very likable. Very, very reliable and honest. And very profound in his science, spoken very simply. So you could almost miss the profoundness by his simplicity. And then we started working. He was extremely ambitious, actually. The thing that I really learned from him, one thing that really hit me hard was you could be extremely ambitious with very little resources at your disposal. You could still be doing very well. And he used to teach us how to solve problems with very little resources in your lab. I think that trick came in very good stead to us in the long run. We learned science under his deep care. He mentored us like a father does his children. He was driven. and therefore we were driven. And extremely open-minded person. I really liked his being very, very ideas person. We are talking of 1978, early 80s, when chromatin was just on the horizon. He was already talking of chromatin remodeling, spermatogenesis, transcriptional control, transcriptional complexes, controlling chromatin remodeling. All these things we used to hear in his tea time discussions and generally in his mentoring talks. So in some sense, I felt he was far ahead of his times in terms of ideas. And that really is what was very, very important, to be ahead of others in ideas. And then you can drive yourself. If you have ideas, you can drive yourself. And that was the lesson that I learned from him. He used to take you around with deep care, all experiments carefully designed, completely open person. You can criticize his experiments, his designs, and he used to modify. So there was a very intimate learning experience that some of us went through. I'm sure Jagmohan also agrees with me. Jagmohan, myself, Prasad, and Prakash, who is there here, all of us overlapped with him. We had fantastic time. We used to tease him also once in a while. I graduated to calling him to Dr. Rao, when Vinay Prasad used to just call him Rao. I used to always sprinkle in MRS. And then that MRS became Mrs. Rao to somebody else. So it was very interesting association. I think getting mentored by him was a blessing, because he was a combination of simplicity, depth, humanness, sensitivity, and contemporary ideas and ahead of times ideas. I think this combination is very rare. I don't think that combination exists even today, if I search for it. So we did whatever we did in his lab. We enjoyed doing whatever we did. And with very little resources, we did extremely well. We did mouth pipetting of P32. We learned it. we actually did some daring experiments. We had to end label nucleosomes. End labeling of nucleosomes in early 80s. And we never got any gamma P32 ATP there. We used to only get P32. And we had standardized this interesting enzyme-based method to phosphorylate ADP, cold ADP to gamma P32 ATP, and then we labeled the nucleosomes. We did what we did. So he was extremely ambitious, extremely bold, and we used to somehow manage to it. It's very important to be extremely ambitious, and that I think was very, very useful. And then, of course, we learned to be bold in publishing things. We learned to be bold in expressing our views. He himself was a man of very, very few words. But when it came to content and substance, he used to say, do this. This is a very important point. You better express it properly. So I think that experience that we went through, I was there with him for, I think, about 6 years. It was a very deeply enriching experience that gave us the strength that we could do things on our own. And, and we moved on with our lives. I don't think I had very frequent interaction with him. Whenever I used to go to Bangalore, I used to just go and touch bases with him, spend some quiet time. We were just simply sitting with each other, but not talking too much. Because after 1 or 2 minutes of conversation, there is total silence. You can't talk much with him. But that was his style of mentoring, and we enjoyed it. I really deeply miss him. One of those people who left indelible impressions on people like us. I went there. I touched his body on, I think, 13th or so, and he left. I felt he was unchanged when I saw him. When I saw his body, he was just simply quietly sleeping. That's all it was. I paid my homage on behalf of all my friends who are abroad, and I think my message reached him, and he is resting at peace. Namaste.
Thank you, BJ. That was very nice. That's going to be followed by another student who joined along with the BJ Rao, and that is Jagmohan Singh.
Prasad. Prasad,
Yeah, Jagmohan, go ahead.
can I?
Okay.
No, only I want to say some words after Jagmohan.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah, I remember Unni, I remember CS Ramesha. I was working on testis protein, and one day Ramesha came in and said we should rename it as turban protein. So, but I think testis protein stands. Yeah, Unni was working on spermatogenesis. BJ, I think, started the area of, took the lead in that. But I think the ideas came from MRS. I planned a speech, but I'm going to go off the speech. So I think a lot of things have been already stated by starting with GP and then Prasad and BJ now. So um, I'll mix it with some humor because it's a very serious occasion. So when I started looking for a mentor at, after my selection, I think there was a long line in front of GP's lab. We had opportunity to interact with everyone. Two major molecular biology labs were those of GP and Padiati. Padiati's lab was also known as molecular biology because of the Malayali connection. But I joined, I think just like Prasad, I think Ganguly chose me to join his lab. And but good news was that that was not my top choice, but everyone said there is a buzz in the air that this is a brilliant young scientist who is joined as pool officer in Ganguly's lab. He is going to be the actual guide. And he is interested in cancer, he is interested in chromatin. So I think that cleared all my personal doubts. And when I met MRS, I asked him, what kind of projects you're going to do on cancer? He, because I thought, still feel that I should work on cancer. But we started with the work on spermatogenesis. And MRS used to share his correspondence with Harris Bush quite often, long letters from Harris Bush. That's where we learned the contribution of Harris Bush in um, small nuclear RNAs and all that. That has become into limelight right now, these years. But he was the original discoverer. So reading his paper, his letters to MRS used to be quite revealing about the pace of science in America. So that became a distant horizon for us to aim for future research. And as BJ and Prasad have mentioned, we learned how to manage with simple things. Labeling of DNA with the P32 phosphate from bark, mixing with ADP and using polynucleotide kinase and running a TLC to purify the purified gamma ATP label, use it for labeling the DNA. S35 methionine, we used to inject into rabbits, the hepatectomized rabbits, mice or rats, and get labeled proteins from liver cells. And I think that taught us how to always keep an open mind, not get bogged down by difficulties, but look for solutions, out of the box solutions. So that trained us in a very, made us bold actually in thinking that there is no dead end in any research, that one can always find solutions. So then we come to the lab seminars. We used to have any common lab seminars with GP's lab and then with our own lab seminars, where we used to have a critique. After, I remember many times I would miss out on some critical points, and next day he would fill up the bank that I missed out something. And that means he was always on top of things. never have an idle mind. In very soft spoken. One would think कि भाई ये तो personality wise I would say very simple person. He probably is not that smart, but he was actually super smart, but not so obvious in your face type of smart. So that built upon her. And then after the evening seminars, we used to go to staff club for cafeteria. We used to have lunch there, or dosa or whatever we wanted at his cost. Occasionally, me and him, we used to go to the staff club to table tennis, play table tennis. And again, as Prasad said, he was very good at it, almost all games. And I learned the trick how to beat him, that tire him out. That so initially he would keep winning all the games, then I would keep dodging, and then finally I started winning. Then later on, he would joke, at his own cost, and some people probably who haven't seen him would not get the joke. He would say, tongue in cheek, he was bad at only one game, that is basketball. So I think those who those who know him know what it means. So then after 8 to 9 years of postdoc, I went back and met him. Met him in the same, I think, different lab in the same old building. There was a moment when I just was walking past. I stayed in the guest house. I was walking past the old building, and it was a very moment filled with nostalgia, remembering old memories flooded back into my mind. And it was very highly emotional, that also a sense of gratitude that I had a training in such a great institute and such a great lab. And I think all I've done so far in my career is probably because of that training. And then when I met him, he was very positive about everyone, how well everyone had done in the lab. I think there was no exception. The training was so great that we learned how to solve the problems. That it was not work for us, it was fun to solve a problem. And he particularly mentioned, I think most of us worked on something which was known to us, like BJ worked on histone variants, had an excellent work on the change on the nucleosome organization with the histone variants. I worked on the TP proteins. But he was at that moment very excited about the discovery of spermatocyte specific nuclear matrix protein. He said that's a novel finding because it is not only a new protein discovery, but it's also conserved during rat spermatogenesis in all the mammalian species. So that was, to my mind, still, apart from that, he also later on discovered role of nuclear RNAs in spermatogenesis. But regardless of, I think everyone got wonderful training, and I think everyone, without exception, probably has been doing great work since after that. So his treatment of his students, I think, in my personal experience, was that of an elder brother. Because you always face difficulties, he would always say, don't worry, treat me as elder brother, I'm there to help you. So his training was not just a technical one. I think it was a very moral and spiritual training. So like all of us, I think it's a great personal loss to me. And it was a great shock when I heard the news from, I think original news was sent by George Thomas through email, and I think I confirmed with other friends. So I'm sure the family hasn't suffered much more because of the long association. Padma had. It was nice to have met him because it was while we were his students that they got married, and so we had time to meet each other on many occasions afterwards as well. After joining MTech, he was also RC member of IMTech for many years. And during our conversation, he would always encourage me and confirm that, yeah, difficulties are going to be there. Pace of research in India is still slow, but don't worry, keep at it. So regarding, I think both his students, us, and his family can take kind of satisfaction from the fact that we inherit a strong legacy, and we should be proud of our legacy through him and his training. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagmohan. If I may add something to what you said about molecular biology in IISc. So it was called molecular biology because there were four big names. So it was Dr. Jacob, Pariati, Dr. Charail, and Gopinathan, right? So I have to say that, in Columbia, when my professor got tenure, somebody wrote on the board in a big letters, in Columbia, you don't have to be Jewish to get tenure because he was not Jewish. So like that, Rao broke the mold. You don't have to be Malayali to do molecular biology in IISc. So okay, with that, I had an order, but I'm going to let Unni speak. Before Unni speaks, I want to know, there is somebody here. It says iPhone. Are they here still? No. So the remaining speakers after Unni would be Nishant, and Ullas said he might join. And Bharat was here, but I think he's looks like he's left. So we will start with Unni for now. I'll find out from Ullas when he can join us. Unni, go ahead.
Prasad, can I check? Prasad,
Yeah.
Prakash Kulkarni also is there, who was a contemporary of ours.
Yeah, actually, I offered him to speak. Prakash, would you like to speak?
You're muted, Prakash.
Prakash, unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I would like to say a few words if that's
okay.
possible.
I will call upon you.
Yeah, no problem.
Then after Unni, you can speak. So Unni, go ahead.
Oh, thank you for this great opportunity. There are some things which all of you are not known of Dr. Rao, and I like to highlight them, those incidents, personal contacts I have with him. When I joined with Dr. Ganguly in 1976, the lab was concentrating on vitamin A, and Ramesha was working on lipids. So at that time, the main idea is estrogen-primed chicken oviduct development of bird O'Malley's. And that was the work mainly going on, and retinol binding proteins. But when I joined Ganguly, he said that I'm interested with the role of vitamin A in cell differentiation and cell proliferation. You come up with some model. And that's how at that time, Dr. Rao joined the lab. I told him, okay, there is a good model with spermatogenesis where in the early stage you can have cell proliferation, and then in the meiotic phase, cell differentiation. So that's how we'll start. At that time, he was interested in histones, and this is how we started. And we were able to do, identify the different histones and the test-specific protein called. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is how we started working on vitamin, and my thesis is vitamin A and spermatogenesis. And Prasad was working on retinol binding proteins. And the second year, when Bijay Rao and Jagmohan Singh came, they took out the TP proteins, which this transition proteins 1 and 2, and they worked on its interactions. Yeah, later on, I continued with the TP proteins, made knockouts of these mice. And then I also showed there was a protein which was saying TP4, which was not sure, but I was able to isolate that protein. But the thing is that this protein was found in the brain, and my mentor at Houston, he said, "Yeah, your protein is in the brain." That was very funny of him. So that is how this thing started again. So once, I think GT asked MRS Rao, when we got interested in spermatogenesis, MRS Rao told GT, it is Unni who brought the idea of working on spermatogenesis, differentiating the proliferation and differentiation, and that is how all the I was able to teach him the basics of spermatogenesis at that time, and then he picked it up. Then another occasion is, which most of you doesn't know, is that after getting PhD, I was back in Cochin, and Dr. Rao and Dr. Bijara, what was the professor's name in Usmania? That
LK
Ramchandran.
LK, okay. So they came for a conference in Lechdale, and they know that I am a. So Dr. Rao asked me, "Can you take
Unni,
me
can you speak up a little louder?
speaker?"
Please.
Okay.
I think his voice is gone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Yes,
can hear you.
yes, very clear.
Okay. So Dr. Rao, oh, come on. Dr. Rao asked me, "Can you take me to Guruvayur temple?" Okay. So we made a pilgrimage trip. Padma was very happy, and because during that time, my wife was there, and they were explaining to Dr. Rao and all the temples in the development. So we had a pilgrimage from Cochin to Irnyalakura Kudalmanikeswar temple. Then from there, the famous temple, the Vadakkanathan, where the Thrissur Purams are. And from there, we went to Guruvayur temple. And on the way back, we stopped at Kaladi temple also. So that was a great trip. He was so happy to, he has got up because he said it was his childhood wish to go to Guruvayur temple, and I was able to help him to do that. And while working with Dr. Rao, I had a very good time with him. He was all the time understanding, and he helped me develop my whole thesis. And in fact, I also make tribute to Dr. Patmara. He also helped me to continue and finish my PhD, because this was an entirely new field, from retinol binding protein study to a model in which you can identify the cell differentiation and the cell proliferation. Thank you for your time, and thanks for help.
Thank you, Unni. Okay, let's go with Prakash now, and then I will ask Nishant, you're speaking, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so just to keep the order chronological, I'm going to let Prakash say, because Prakash was immediate junior to me and Vijay Rao.
Yeah, thanks, Prasad. I don't have the distinction of being his student, but I do have the distinction of being one of his first postdocs, if you will. I started out as a short-term visitor from a rural university in Karnataka with a zoology major in BSc. And it was amazing how he welcomed me in his lab, if you will. Actually, I started out like everybody did with Professor Ganguly. And Rao was then Institute SRF. And he assigned me to work with Rao, and it was a real pleasure. It was a turning point in my life, if you will. I learned a lot from Rao, and if you, BJ and Prasad and Unni, you guys remember, Jagmohan, you were the ones who taught me how to make a column, pack a column, so if you will, and how to run it in the cold room, how to pull the fractions, and etc. So it was a really amazing experience, and how much I learned from there. That actually gave me the confidence to, dream big and to pursue my dreams, if you will. And it would not have been possible to go from Harvard to Caltech and work with Ed Lewis had it not been for MRS Rao's guidance and for your guidance as well. I owe you guys and Rao a great deal of gratitude for that. So it was a real shock when we got this news, and it was delivered to me by my friend. His name is Mohit, and he is now, BJ may know him. Mohit is in IISc. He's a mathematician, if you will, works with Rangarajan, with whom I work as well now. And it was a real shock for me and Amita, just because only in January 20, I met him, and he seemed like in extremely good health. And I spent half a day in his lab. We talked a lot. We met Padma and everybody else, like all of us did. And so it's kind of hard to express my feelings at this moment. But what I'm going to do is going to read. I was going through the correspondence I've had with him over the last 43 years, if you will. And I'm just going to read an excerpt from one of his latest emails he wrote in response to a reflections article I wrote when I turned 65. And the editor of Biomolecules invited me to write this, so I wrote it. I think I shared it with many of you, BJ in particular, I remember. And this is what Rao had to say to me, which really touched my heart. He said, I'm also happy to receive and read your reflections of your career all through these 40 years in science. Although I would have liked that you would settle down in a tenured position, as you have mentioned, I'm really proud of your scientific temper and passion. I've always encouraged my colleagues to think about original problems and pursue them, which we heard often today. And I'm really happy that you have not fallen into the trap of bandwagon science and have really explored your inner passion of pursuing the unknown. You have done extremely well and have been happy and been proud about your achievements. I'm pretty sure that your concepts and the unsolved questions that you have brought out in your article will enthuse many more young minds to embark on these journeys. I still remember your days in your lab, in our lab, and those days were really exciting. I'm blessed that I had the fortune of students like you pass through my mentorship quadrangle. I'm pretty sure that you have many more years of active, productive years ahead. I do hope the system will support you for many more years to come. I think when he referred to, he remembers my early days, he was trying, I think he referred to the coffee club I ran in his lab. I used to make omelets and coffees in the midnight, and it was real fun to be in his lab. So I owe Rao a great deal of gratitude, if you will. And although my scientific inquiry never overlapped with his, I learned a lot, but I took a different path, if you will. But somehow destiny brought us together again, and our paths overlapped, or crossed at least, I should say. Of late, I've been working on a small peptide. It's called a micropeptide that's encoded by a link RNA. And so that's my connection to Rao's research, if you will. Of late, the last 10 years or so, I think he was really interested in long non-coding RNAs or the link RNAs. So I had just prepared an email to write to him about these findings and tell him that I would be probably visiting him next year when we learned of his loss, of his death, if you will. And so that really saddened me a lot. Alas, that email is going to remain unsent. So with that, I'm going to say, may his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Prakash. So I have to say, Prakash said, he was labeled. There were many different labels. There were standard track of students. There was FIP students, and there was the short-term workers. So I don't know if Prakash knows this, but he had people used to call him short-term worker with long-term plans.
Yeah.
Because he came to the lab, he fell in love with one of Rao's students, Amita
Right.
Bera, and married her, and then he left with the wife. So he was called short-term worker with a long-term
plan. And there was confusion whether I was also a Singh or what. So people used to call me the Harvard Singh just for the sake of it.
Okay, so let's move to now. Thank you, Prakash.
Sure.
I'll move to Nishant, and then after that,
Prasad, just before Nishant goes, I would also like to say a couple of words about Rao. I worked with Rao just for 2 years. I came from IIT Madras just when I was writing my thesis, and worked more or less like a postdoc for 2 years. And he has influenced my career throughout. Actually, when I got my, I came to UPenn to work with Dr. Hecht, Norman Hecht, because Hecht was a collaborator and friend of MRS Rao. And then when I got my first grant, MRS Rao said, I always corresponded with him, and he said, work twice as hard. You have nothing to complain now. And when I got my tenure, I wrote to him. And most recently, I wrote to him on every year. I used to write to him a brief email on the Guru Purnima day, because I consider him as a great guru I've had. And on July 3rd, he replied to me. And again, he expected his students to work hard, and he had no fluff in his science. He did really good science, worked hard, cared about his people. Thank you for organizing this. I think Nishant was a student immediately after our group. Bharat, Ruhikant Nite, Geeta Vani, all these students were there when I was there. Thank you.
You said only 2 years.
Yep.
So that means you did PhD in 2 years?
No, I did PhD in IIT Chennai, but when I was writing my thesis, I didn't have a good mentor-student relationship in IIT, and I came to IISc because my wife was working with Sharat Chandra, and I stayed with Rao for 2 years. Then I came to the US, and I went to UPenn. And then when I went to industry for a brief period of time, he was not very happy. When I came back to academia, he was really happy that I came back, and then went and visited him in JNC, gave a presentation there. At that time also, he had about 18 students in his lab. I always kept in touch with him, and always, as everybody mentioned, he expected his students to work hard and expected nothing less than perfection from his students. Very proud of being associated with his lab.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So we call you Varghese?
Varghese is
Thank
fine.
you, Varghese.
Yeah, and he had also visited us in Pennsylvania when he came to Fox Chase. I arranged for a meeting with Samir and Ruhikant and us at our place, and he enjoyed visiting us. Amazing person. We'll all miss him.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to Nishant. After Nishant, Kalpana would like to say a couple of sentences. Go ahead, Nishant. Please tell us,
okay.
what was your time frame?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Prasad, for organizing this. So I am relatively young, I think, compared to all of the other speakers who have spoken so far. So I actually joined IISc Bangalore in 1997 as an integrated PhD student. And so when it came to choosing the lab where I need to do my PhD, by that time, Professor MRS Rao was already like a legend. He had already had a huge track record of various accomplishments and all. So it was pretty easy for me to choose his lab for my PhD. So I was there in his lab specifically from 2000 to 2005, so around 5 years that I took for the PhD work. So my PhD was basically to continue work which was done by Dr. Lakshmi Ramachandran. I think maybe some of the older students would probably know her. I have never personally met her, but she had identified some meiotic DNA repair sites, from rat spermatocytes. And so Professor Rao wanted me to continue that, identify its homologs from mice, and determine its chromosomal localization and find out what it does. So the work that he gave me involved a lot of very, I would say, state-of-the-art genomics kind of approach, genetics and genomics kind of approach, in terms of sequencing these DNA repair sites, mapping its chromosomal positions. So these were all things which at that time, I'm talking about like early 2000 and all, were still very challenging to do in India. And Professor Rao had set up a sequencing facility in the department, which actually facilitated all this. So what I am trying to say here is that even at that point of time, Professor Rao was very ahead of most of his contemporaries in India in terms of the tools and approaches that he would use in his research. During this work, we also identified a long non-coding RNA, and long non-coding RNAs were simply unheard of at that time. The first reports were just coming in the literature. So even for us to believe that we have actually found a long non-coding RNA required us to be very confident of the work that we were doing. And as later on, of course, this long non-coding RNA was further worked on by some of his students in GNCSR. So the research that used to happen in this lab was always very contemporary and very ahead of his time. And that had to do with the kind of problems that he would give to his students. You know, they were not routine, run-of-the-mill kind of problems. The other thing that I saw during my period of association with him was the kind of facilities that he set up. While I was doing my PhD, he set up a transgenic facility primarily to look at some of these transition proteins. I think he wanted to create TP2 transgenes in the mice. He set up a microarray facility to initiate a cancer genomics program. Now, these were all technologies which were just coming in, even in the Western countries. And I think his lab was among the first to acquire these facilities in India and to use them for research. So he was someone who was really ahead of his time. And working in his lab was not just about science. I think some of his later students may remember, we also had a television in the lab where we could actually watch movies. I think he probably kept it because he was a big fan of cricket. And so we would watch cricket in this television that he had in his lab. And we also used to have regular cricket matches with GP's lab. So it is, of course, very nice to see GP here again. So both the labs used to have cricket matches. So it was both scientifically very challenging place to work, and also personally a very fulfilling place to work as well. So when I completed my PhD, I then moved on to do my postdoc, basically continuing in the broad area of DNA repair, genome stability and all, but with Eric Alani, who is actually a yeast person. So I probably thought he may not have any connection with MRS Rao. But again, I was mistaken about the reach of Professor MRS Rao, because Eric Alani was actually a postdoc with Richard Kolodner. And Professor MRS Rao had spent a few sabbaticals in Kolodner's lab, where he had discovered this MSH2 gene, which was a very big discovery because of its role in colorectal cancer. And when he passed away, I actually wrote to Kolodner and Eric Alani, they both sent their condolences to Professor Rao's family. So eventually, I returned back to India to start as an independent PI at IISr Trivandrum. And there also, Professor Rao's imprint was unmistakable, because he was actually the chairperson of the BOG of IISr Trivandrum. He was actually actively involved in setting up this IISr from the scratch. And so because of that, I had a lot of opportunities to see him, because he would frequently visit our institute as part of various activities related to the institute. And he also inspired me and my good friend and colleague, Professor Kostas Sanyal from JNC, to start this chromosome stability meeting series, which we have been both running for the last 12 years now, and has turned out to play a very important role in the development of this field in India. So the way I would like to remember Professor MRS Rao is as a very inspiring mentor. He is not somebody with whom you work just to learn some techniques or skills, but actually to learn how to do science. And also someone who inspires you to actually do more than what you think you can do. He was someone who was way ahead of his time in terms of the research problems that he would take to work on. And he was someone who embraced new technology. As I mentioned to you, he probably set up the first sequencer in India, the first microarray facility in India, the first transgenic facility in India. He was always a technology person, even later in his age, at a time when most of us would struggle to adopt to new methods. He was very, very comfortable with technology. And he was also someone who was big on ideas. You go to him with a small problem, and he could come back with a much larger question to solve. And he was also someone who was extremely generous and kind, because he was one of those few people who would take delight in the success of others around him. So this is probably I would like to remember him, and we hope that if he can even achieve a small fraction of whatever he managed to achieve. Yeah, so I think with that I would end. It was his news of his passing came as a big shock. Since I'm close in Trivandrum, I was able to visit his family, see his wife and his children. Yeah, I think that's about what I have to say.
Thank you,
So
Nishant.
again, thanks Prasad for setting up this event.
Hi, Nishant. Just yesterday, I was talking to Francesca Cole from MD Anderson, and she mentioned about your time in Alani's lab and about MRS Rao. So, yeah, it's a small world, and everybody prizes him and his contribution.
Thank you, Nishant. So Kalpana was not a student of MRS Rao. She was a Ram Sharma student. She is my spouse, and she's also a professor at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. He just wanted to say 2 sentences.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be in this group because I was at IISc for a very short time, and also I did not directly work with MRS Rao, but however, I came to know about MRS Rao in many occasions. When we visited India, and when MRS Rao and his family visited us in US, I interacted with him and I came to know with him, and it was such a pleasure. And it is all consistent with all the things that you're saying. And he always came to my talk in IISc or in JNCSR, and we had many interesting interactions after the talks. And then we also went to his house and had dinner with him and had visited his family, and his family also came with us and visited us in the US. And so he was like all of you said, a gentle soul. At the same time, it was very clear that he is dedicated to science, and he's such a sharp person. And it was the joy of doing science that always came through when I talked to him about his work, or when I was describing about my work, even though I work on a chromatid remodeling protein, not directly addressing chromatid remodeling, but its influence on various other things like viral replication and cancer. He always really enjoyed listening to it. And immediately he would show his latest data and his latest work that is ongoing in the lab, including the link RNAs, other things when he visited. And it was such a joy when we talked to him. So it didn't matter whether I was his student or not. He really enjoyed listening to science and interacting with scientists. And he was also very proud of his trainees and his students and postdocs. He had always was proud to share the latest research that is going on in the lab and mention about, oh, this is done by so-and-so, this is done by so-and-so. And he had mentioned about PJ Rao, Jagmohan Singh, and Ujjwal, and so many people. And also I had the opportunity to meet with all of these people when I went to India, and also came to know about them closely, not only through MRS Rao, but of course through Prasad and Prakash also, Prakash and Namita. So it was such a great group of people and great trainees, and it is really everybody should be proud of. He has left a great legacy, and it even though it's a big loss for science, especially in India, his legacy lives long, and it is time tested, time honored legacies, and the training and the quality of science he was doing, and the high standard with which he conducted the research. It's also clear. He he we lost him when I think he is still young, and when he has the potential to offer even more. However, lot of great people achieve a lot of things in a very short time. We know a lot of examples like Shankaracharya, Vivekananda. They accomplished so much in such a short time, and it's possible that Rao has meant to accomplish this much in this life and got great honors in India, Bhatnagar Award, everything. In this regard, Rao has left a great legacy, and even though he departed us, I think we'll be able to remember him and his science through his publications and all the continuous research that's ongoing with his trainees. So I also want to say that I came to know about Padma very closely when we visited him and when they came here. So while Rao is so gentle, Padma is the complete complement of that, I would say. She's full of joy and life, and they were a great and very loving couple. And I really express my sympathy to Padma and Rao's mother and two children, and then pray God to pray God to give them strength to bear this loss. And with this, I say that Rao souls rest in peace, and thank you for this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so thanks, Kalpana. So those are all the scheduled speakers, and we reached 12 o'clock, past 12 o'clock. Is there anyone who did not speak, like to say anything very quickly?
You have to unmute, Shashi. You have to unmute.
You're muted. You're muted, Seshi. Seshi, we cannot.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Now we can hear.
Yeah. I think it was 1979. By the way, I was not his student, but I interacted with him very briefly. I think it was 1979 when he just returned from the US, and I had written a paper in a field of immunology on major histocompatibility restriction. And I requested if he would look over it and make any comments. And he was so generous. Yeah, sure. And he did look at it. And as Professor GP said, his comments were soft, but very firm. And, he praised where it is due. And also he identified, cautionary notes because it was a theoretical speculation. And yeah, I always remembered that brief interaction with him. I always carried that image of him in my mind in all these years. Thanks, Prasad, allowing me to say this.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Great, wonderful. So I think everyone has spoken now. And I don't think I see anyone else asking to speak. So I would like to thank everyone who spoke, starting with Professor GP, ending with Seshi. Just want to say that, someone mentioned Dr. Rao is short, but he was a short, they say in Kannada, Murti chikkadadru kirti dodadu. That means even though the figure is small, he had it was like a small thing in which huge amount of energy, intelligence, and brightness and goodness was packed. That was the kind of person he was. So I appreciate that Ramesh and Subbarao gave us this opportunity to mourn the loss of Dr. MRS Rao, to celebrate his life and accomplishments, and allowed us to pray for his soul to rest in peace. So thank you, everyone, for your time today and for your words today.
Thank
Bye.
you, Prasad, for arranging this.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's
Thank you,
continue
everybody,
his legacy.
especially the newcomers who have joined. So this is not just for the IISc biochemistry. Anybody who has any connection with IISc can join this group. So you are free to. We have every third Saturday we have meeting, and sometimes we just chat, catch up with things. Sometimes somebody will give a talk, scientific or philosophical or some journey. It's a good way to hang out and keep in touch. So you may want to consider this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Ramesh.
BJ, you were saying something?
No, I was trying to thank VR Prasad for bringing us together to pay the homage to MRS.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true. I also forgot. Thank you, Prasad, for taking initiative to arrange this one.
Welcome. It was a great group. Really nice to have these reminiscences. This is the best way we can celebrate Rao, and
That's
by
right.
thinking about him and what he has done. It was amazing to hear what I want to say to Dr. GP. I remember those joint lab meetings between MRS Rao's lab and your lab. It was like you said, it was a small space, and the only way to participate was you either sit a foot away from the blackboard, and the speaker has very little room to stand and maneuver, or you have to sit in one of the benches and you look through the bottles. So look at the presentation through the bottles. I remember that. So I always got the space behind the bottles because I came 5 minutes late. So I remember those were precious interactions.
Prasad, the new building came and everybody was moving. I kind of initially said, no, I don't want to move. I will continue. Then he said, nobody will be here. You better move. Then only I moved. With that corridor and with that thing, it's a great memory.
Yeah, and it was very
with that old building. It's very difficult. It's, for us to have gone through generations. Today I'm hearing my grand students. Students. So it's okay. How
And
long
we were
it
doing.
Where was this corner in the building? I'm just trying to picture where did you meet?
It's a corridor.
Where?
Old biochemistry department upstairs. My lab and Rao's lab are contiguous.
Oh, that is much later than my time there.
No. My when I was there, when BJ Jagmohan, we were all there. It was your lab was right next to the office, and
yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah, so
that was demolished, and then the whole thing was rebuilt with upstairs and first.
I see.
And Rao moved close to my lab, next lab.
Okay.
My recollection was that your lab was right next to the chairman's office, and that you walked down and you went into Dr. Morgill's lab. That was a kind of a
that was the first, yeah, that's right.
Professor Vityathil's lab was in between.
Oh, yeah, so for sure, yeah.
Right.
He used to steal.
And we have to go down to see Morgill's lab, actually.
Yeah, and in front of the office during the pre-viva time, you would be seeing these students who are candidates are about to go in for some kind of a life sentence, and they would be looking very sad and very nervous.
Torturous death.
And near Vityathil's lab, we could see the bottle effect without seeing any bottle.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can smell it. What a wonderful time.
Right. Professor Vityathil was always very proud of anyone who did protein biochemistry. So in my thesis defense presentation, I had done some peptide mapping with the help of Professor Vitaital. So someone asked me, how do you know that these two proteins are the same, a nuclear compartment and the cytoplasmic compartment? So I actually was worried how to answer that, because what if there is a contamination of cytoplasm with nuclear pieces? Then before I would say anything, Professor Vithathal got up and looked at the questionnaire and said, he put his hands like this and he said, he did peptide mapping, compared the two, they were identical. What do you want? He said. So that person had to sort of sit down and really be
Only
quiet.
thing is, each word will come, it will take a minute for that.
Think and go like this, right? Yeah, I remember.
Yes, right.
He's the one who got me admission in the IISc, because he started asking questions. I didn't know him. I just started asking about amino acids. So coming from Kerala University, we don't have much knowledge of much anything. So that's something which I knew. So I started talking, then he started asking me about protein. So that lasted for a long time. So the others didn't have any chance to ask much, especially Dr. Kama. So when the list came out, I came out number 11. That was the last person chosen in the list that year. So I told him that much later, after we became friends. I was kind of scared him initially, but then the friendship developed, because I used to smoke at that time. He would come through the back door. You have a cigarette? And he would take one and smoke with me. So that's when I started talking about my interview with him, and it was funny.
I remember Unni's thesis defense presentation. So like everybody in Ganguly's lab, we all started with the same sentence. Vitamin A is essential for growth, vision, and differentiation. So, so at the end of the talk, Professor Kurup, he got up and he asked a question. In the beginning, you said vitamin A is required for vision. Did you really mean vision, or did you mean sight? If it is the former, we are all vitamin A deficient.
I do have a small story, actually, a short story. And Rao actually drove Ganguly to our place in 1978 when we were living in Austin. And little did I know that Rao was going to join as a pool officer in his lab. But Rao drove him. Ganguly comes inside the house, washes his hands, ready for lunch, and then asks us, so do we have any fish for lunch?
Oh.
And my wife said, we have fish of the land. And he says, what is that? He said, chicken. He said, oh, you Connecticuters, you never eat fish properly. Only Mangaloreans do. But I want to eat fish. So we took him to a fishy restaurant that evening. But it was interesting to see, there are a lot of Ganguly jokes, but I still remember his comments about not eating fish.
Yeah, that's what joins the Keralites and Bengalis together, the fish. Coastal area. So,
I know.
Live somehow.
I know a Ganguly joke. It's not really a joke, but I'll tell you anyway, because it was actually a tender, Channappa, in the lab. Remember Channappa, everybody?
Yeah.
He was a tall guy. So he used to, Professor Ganguly used to send him to bring coffee for him. Had to bring from TMC. That is I think it was some kind of a workers' club, right? It was so it was a bit far away compared to the cafeteria.
Oh, yeah. On the hostel side, near the Inns Dock.
Yeah,
right. I remember that one.
So, but he had to take Professor Ganguly's coffee cup, and in that he has to have the coffee put, and then he had to bring it. I don't remember how much it was, 20 paisa maybe, or maybe 30 paisa, I don't remember. So that day, Channappa was looking very sad. I said, what happened? He said, well, Professor wanted me to bring coffee. So he wants me to bring it in TMC only, but it's too far for me. So I went to the cafe, our canteen, what do you call it, which was nearby, cafeteria, right? So it's a little bit more. So I put 5 paisa from my pocket and then got the coffee from there. But Professor Ganguly got upset that they gave less coffee.
Oh,
What happened to the rest of the coffee?
he didn't taste the difference.
No, he did
I'm
not want
amazed
to
that-
ask him.
Maybe Chennappa tasted it, make sure it's
Oh, make sure it's coffee.
Okay, folks, I'm leaving. Bye.
Oh boy.
All right.
Kulkarni,
Thank you.
Prakash, where are you? Prakash, where are you?
Where am I? That's a good question. I'm right now in California, in the City of Hope. It's a National Cancer Center in Duarte.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
And I also have a visiting professor position at Caltech in my old school. So
Okay, good.
I manage both.
Hey, Prakash, I didn't recognize you.
Oh, you did not?
Yeah, I was on.
Me too. Yeah, I didn't recognize him.
Yeah, I wear a different wig
How
now.
is Amita?
Yeah.
Take care, everybody. I need to run.
Yeah,
Thank you.
me
Okay.
too.
Bye then.
Dr. BJ, nice
Thanks,
meeting
everybody.
you, Prasad. Nice meeting
Bye.
you guys.
Thank you.
Bye, Dr.
Thank you.
GP.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night. Good afternoon.